I have a lot of interest in deafness because I was born deaf, and I've always grown up as a deaf person. People who are deaf or have a hearing impairment can be very excluded in society, particularly people who've lost their hearing as part of the ageing process. And the impact of going deaf, having been a hearing person, can be very significant. People become withdrawn and they can become isolated, anxious, depressed, and it intrigued me really whether we could use tango as a medium to not only to see whether people could hear or feel the music, experience the music, musicality, but also whether it could encourage a sense of inclusion. There have been recent research studies that show that tango can help alleviate depression. We know that there have been recent studies that tango can help alleviate the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. And so it felt that there was a lot of potential that hadn't been explored. There was, that tango had the potential to empower, to include people, to enrich people's lives.
Melanie and I decided that we would adopt a queer tango approach for these workshops. And it's bound up with the origins of tango, its history, and how that affects how it's danced today, and some of the qualities that are to do with the queer. So if I unpack it for you a bit, what is queer tango? It takes traditional tango, the mainstream tango, but changes some of the rules. Conventionally, it is expected that if there is a man and there is a woman, then the man will lead and the woman will follow. What queer tango says is, no, we don't make that assumption. And indeed, we don't even assume that it's going to be a man and a woman. It might be two women. It might be two men. And the reason that we chose this for these workshops was that we did not want to predetermine what anybody would be expected to do in the workshop based on their gender. So a woman might walk in through the doors and come into the dance studio, and we would not be assuming, oh, she's a woman, she's going to follow. She might want to lead. We enabled this to happen by inviting some very, very skilled tango dancers, men and women, but almost all of them could lead or follow. And they wore labels indicating whether they could lead or follow, and we encouraged the participants to say to them, after an initial period when we obliged everybody to lead and follow, so that they got some experience of both roles, we then said to the participants, you choose. You decide whether you'd like to lead or follow, and ask the person that you're with, who's facilitating, which of those roles you'd like to do.
I lost nearly half the hearing in my left ear as a result of illness when I was an adult. And so I grew up speaking and hearing, and so that kind of experience as you're growing up stays with you.
In the last few years, I have noticed that sometimes I find it difficult to actually hear and understand what someone's saying. So I might get the gist, and there might just be the odd word that I miss that might be crucial to the meaning of the sentence. So I've been thinking, well, maybe my hearing is not quite as good as it was. My expectation of the other people involved was that there would be a group of people who were very hard of hearing. So I wasn't quite sure how I would fit in, because as I say, I wouldn't describe myself as being deaf.
All the facilitators, they were friendly, they knew what they were doing, they were confident, but they were receptive, they were empathic, they were sociable, there was a lot of mingling over coffee, there was a lot of humour.
Every time I take on a project, I expect that there'll be a level of learning that comes with it. And of course, I expected to learn more about tango, and also expected to learn more about working with people who have a hearing loss. And both of those things, I think, were fulfilled. And the other thing is that it was a lot of fun. I really, really enjoyed it. And part of that enjoyment was about seeing other people really enjoy it as well, and seeing other people get to the point where they felt like they had accomplished something. One of the most educative kind of moments for me, both in dance and just, well, on several levels, was when a gentleman who was profoundly deaf taught me how to make these steps move with the music. And it was a lovely moment.
When you're deaf, when you're lip reading, you're not able to lip read but also follow the movements of the dance teacher. So Ray then had to adapt his style of teaching. So he had to look at everybody, make sure everybody could lip read him, see his lips, explain the move that he was going to do, and then demonstrate it.
Quite naturally, we got deaf couples, a deaf leader and a deaf follower, because between them they were able to hear different parts of the music, and they were able to bring that together so that they could dance together. One of the facilitators, an experienced tango dancer, said, actually, that's not very far away from what happens in the mainstream all the time. If two people come together, the music is playing, they listen to it differently. They literally hear different things in the music, but because they are together and they are dancing together and they are realizing one dance together, not two, one, they bring that to the business of realizing the one dance. What was happening with our deaf participants was just a more extreme version of that. But to our surprise, it could be made to work.
There seemed to be a need to take it further, because what people are saying is they were so focused on learning the steps, learning to follow somebody, that they didn't really get into the flow. I feel that there would be a huge benefit in getting people to that level where the dance becomes much more comfortable, much more fluid, and they have, don't have to think all the time about, oh, I've got to do this, I've got to look at the chest, I've got to do, what the leader. So I just feel that's a benefit, that's something that we should think about.
We saw this in many ways as a pilot, a chance to find out whether it was practical or reasonable to do this. The principal thing that we wanted to find out from our participants was this a viable way in which you might experience music and musicality through the body of another human being?
Having rushed over to Wickham to take part in several hours of tango dancing, you would expect to be pretty tired by the end of it, by the end of the evening. What I experienced was I felt actually very uplifted, but it was in a very calm sort of way, so it's very difficult to explain. It was being calm but being energized at the same time, and I think I spoke to Ray about that and explained how I felt, and he said, yes, that's exactly what I get from dancing tango, and that's why I do it, and that's why I love it so much.
The feedback that we got from our participants was overwhelmingly positive. So to that extent, we have established the potential viability of this model. One of the interesting things that came in that feedback was that many of the participants had themselves automatically assumed that they couldn't be part of a dance event. they presupposed that it wasn't going to happen because of not being able to either to hear the music or hear the music fully. And we were able to demonstrate to them that they could. Coincidentally, one of our facilitators, and I hadn't realized when I'd asked this person to do it, it turned out that this facilitator was also deaf. And it did the participants good to see a very, very skilled tango dancer who was also deaf. I think we've demonstrated to our satisfaction that this model has some life in it, and if we're able to secure further funding, we might well do further versions of this. We have an ideal. If we can give people, participants, sufficient confidence on the dance floor, there is no reason why eventually they could not go to mainstream dance events, so not dance events specially organized for deaf people, and they could take part. And that is an ambition. We would very, very much like to be able to push open the doors of the dance hall and enable deaf people to come in and to take part and to fully take part. This will take some preparation. We might need to go as a group. We might need to do some speaking to the people running the dance event and try some tests out. But that certainly is an aspiration for the future. And if we were able to achieve that, that would be pretty colossal.